What's good, y'all? If you don't know me, my name is Shay. If you do, welcome back. I just help, Muslim nerds gain the first pound of muscle that they'll ever want and the last pound of muscle that they'll ever need. So if you're into gaming, anime, stuff like that, you know what I mean? We talk about how we can implement that into our lives and make it better along with Islam, stuff like that. So we know that right now, let me get straight to the point, right? So right now we're in the month of Ramadan, okay? And as I'm speaking right now, this is our literally the first fast. I'm about 2 hours away from breaking the first fast, and I want to talk a little bit about someone who wasn't particularly, best on their deen, things of that nature, wasn't particularly that Islamic, and someone who, struggled with discipline in other areas of life, like meditating, taking care of your mental health, or like maybe fitness, things of that nature. I also dislike fitness. So like a lot of my background comes from disliking things, okay? Just like make that clear, make it simple. Yeah, a lot of my I've talked about this on the channel before. For those of you who are new, it's like a lot of the things I've talked about come from the dislike I've had for things like Islam, things like working out, things like taking care of myself, all that stuff. Especially as a former league player, you know what I mean? So I kind of wanted to talk about how you can take solo leveling. So this isn't clickbait or anything like that. How you can take solo leveling and implement that in with Islam and Ramadan specifically, and even with fitness and all the other things that you do in your life that you want to be more consistent in, you can implement the system. And it's essentially a system where you gamify it, okay? For those of you who have not watched Solo Leveling, I'd highly recommend watching it. It's a pretty good anime. But I'm going to explain the premise of how this works a little bit, okay? And there's going to be a doc in the description that's going to help out too, okay? So what do I mean when I mean gamify it, right? I don't necessarily literally mean like thinking of it as a game, although you can do that, but I want to do something a little bit more tactical this time, okay? And that is something that it's like a table that I've made on the Notes app, and it was actually inspired by one of another YouTuber. But basically, what it is I want you to think about it a lot like an RPG or an ARPG. You know what I mean? You build your character. I've been playing a lot of PoE too, so it's a lot like that. But you build your character, and what we know from solo leveling, right, is that this character Jinwoo, for those of you who don't know, is like this really, really weak character in this world, okay? And then all of a sudden, what happens is he goes to fight some of these monsters, and he essentially like dies and becomes reborn, okay? I'm not like a whole fanatic into the thing. I just watch the anime. That's kind of how it goes down, okay? And what happens is he goes from being one of the weakest people, right? And this is, by the way, like in their society, being one of the weaker people, you can't just get stronger. If you're one of the weaker guys in their society, you kind of stay weak. Like that's your ranking. It's almost like a caste system, but like way less oppressive, I guess. And so you usually stay the same ranking. So he's something called an E rank hunter, and he can only kill, mobs or enemies or monsters that are kind of lower tier level, you know what I mean? And so people who are the best of the best are the S tier. But what happens one day is he, long story short, goes into this dungeon, and bro becomes overpowered, okay? He starts leveling up, literally. He starts seeing stuff a lot like a video game where he just levels up, and he has daily quests that he needs to do that if he doesn't do, he gets punished for. But if he does do, he gets rewards for, and he levels up, okay? So that's like the basic premise of how the anime works. And now that I've sort of explained that, let's talk a little bit about how we can actually implement that into our own lives. Because, like, you know, it'd be real nice if we could, implement things kind of like a video game, and we don't just have like screens popping us up telling us, yo, these are your rewards for doing these daily quests, or screens popping up in our face telling us, oh, these are your daily quests, a lot like video games, you know what I mean? There's a smooth sense of progression in video games that we don't necessarily have in real life, and that's what kind of sucks about it, right? So let me talk about how you can do that. So down below linked, I have this doc that I made, okay? And again, inspired by another YouTuber, can't remember his name, I would shout him out, but I can't remember. Watched this video a long time ago. But essentially, in this doc, I've made stats, okay? I've made stats that kind of correlate to something like solo leveling. So like an intelligence stat, like an dexterity stat, things of this nature, okay? And each stat corresponds with any given sort of activity, okay, or any sort of specific goal that you may have, okay? So I'm gonna list out the 5 stats that I personally use that help me with my prayers, that help me with my mental health. So spiritually, mentally, physically, okay? And then I have another stat on there. What is it for? What is it for? What is it for? Yes, and for learning, okay? That's my 4th stat. And then the 5th one happens as a result of me doing all 4 of those, okay? So let me explain all of that, and the great beauty of it is you can adjust it and play the game to how you want to play it, and there's a level up system, things of that nature. Now, of course, I'm not like a developer or app creator or anything like that. If any of you are, I would love to do something where I'm able to make an app kind of like that. But essentially, this is how it works. So I know a lot of you understand in solo leveling, as you level up, your stats get better and better and better. But here it's sort of the opposite in some sense, in which the more you do a certain stat, or the more you get better at all the stats that are listed, the more you level up, okay? So it's kind of the other way around, because I know in a lot of RPG games, you level up, you kill ads, you level up, and then you get stat boosts. It's kind of the other way around in this, but it's whatever, you know what I mean? It still has a very similar concept to it. So it's essentially still the same thing, right? So let me go over a few examples, and let me go over my sort of what I call daily quests. So this is called daily quests, and these are everything you have to do again daily, and how you gamify it, kind of like solo leveling, and how you're able to have a much better Ramadan because you're on top of your prayers. If you're anything like me, you're just trying to improve a lot of your prayers, you know, improve a lot of your Quran, or one big one is like reading the seerah of the Prophet, things of that nature. So if you have these different goals, you can add them on top of sort of the format that I have, and adjust it accordingly and be creative with it. You know what I mean? You can have a lot of ideas. So let's get started, right? So these are daily quests that you have to do. Under those daily quests, you have the stats that I was talking about. So let's go through each stat, okay? So first off, I have something called a strength stat, okay? And a lot of you can assume, it basically is my physical activity stat. So for example, I work out 4 times a week, okay? 4 times a week. And that stat gets checked off every day as long as I work out 4 times a week, do 2 MMA sessions a week, and 1 rest day. And yes, the rest day does count into my strength stat, because how I've talked about it, right, is rest days are important to build up your muscle. Rest days are important for your recovery, okay? So they do matter, and they do go towards my designated strength stat, even though it is not directly, I guess, strength, okay? Because I'm still following through my routine. Because then what happens is, if I'm not doing physical activity every single day, I just gaslight myself and I say, oh, I'm doing a rest day. Well, that doesn't go toward my strength stat. It's like, no, I still contribute that, and I still contribute that to my strength stat. And how I do that is I operationally define what the strength stat means. So I have the strength stat, okay, and I have the little calendar where I can check stuff off, but underneath you define what that is. This is super important, okay? And here's why it's super important, because if you lack the ability to define things and you keep everything vague and foggy, you get to not hold yourself as accountable, okay? So that is why it is super important for you to define exactly what that means. So let me define exactly pretty much what my strength stat says. And in the template below, if I don't describe it exactly, the template below that I've linked, again, free to use, stuff like that, no email, no nothing, just like free to use, just click it, all right? That'll give you the best operational definition. If I do get it wrong here, mix it up. But essentially, my operational definition for it, and operational definition, for those of you who don't know, is just a fancy way of saying like a SMART goal, or something that is very specific, like you can define it, okay? And for me, it is 1 physical activity bout per day, okay? Including the rest days that are dedicated. Okay, including the dedicated rest days, okay? So that goes into my strength stats. So again, for physical activity, for me personally, I go to the gym 4 times a week, and then I do 2 bouts of MMA training during the weekend, which I'm gonna do right before I break my fast here. And then 1 rest day, okay? Next stat. Next stat is my intelligence stat, okay? And again, this one pretty self-explanatory, but I'll explain it more. This one is essentially me learning, and this is going to be the operational definition for it. One thing that I can recall throughout the entire day that I've learned. Just one, just one. That's all I care about, just one, okay? Because I feel like in the modern age we have so much information. You know what I mean? There's so much going on around us and things of that nature. We're constantly learning things that sometimes in the effort to learn so many things, you actually end up forgetting everything. You know what I mean? You end up forgetting what you learned at all because you're just getting information thinking you're improving, but it's not actually the case because you're not implementing, or you can't even remember what you were learning. You know what I mean? So I have to be able to recall one thing that I learned, okay? Let me give you an example of what that looks like. So at the end of the day, I have an alarm set for when I fill out my little daily quests, which I pretty much call daily quests, but I also call the little stat line the skill tree, okay? So when I fill out and check mark the skill tree, and when I do that, that's when I repeat the one thing that I've learned daily, okay? And it could be something like, so when you're lifting weights, the stretch portion of the lift is actually very muscle promoting. So I have to repeat that to myself. You know what I mean? I know it sounds kind of stupid, but I think that's important because what it does is it tests your ability to recall. So this is going to help, especially for you folks that are in school that are, I mean, I'm in school as well, but folks that have like any upcoming tests, finals, those specific classes that are really, really difficult, this is going to help you with that recall. And then again, you can change it. Instead of making it one thing that you learned, you could make it, I'm going to recall everything that I've learned today about that particular class, about X class or about Y class. You know what I mean? So you can change this and be creative. So that's where the creative aspect comes in a little bit, okay? Same thing with the strength stat, you know, whatever your rest days are, whatever your workout days are, it's just there to hold you accountable essentially, okay? So we have strength, we have intelligence, next stat, right? Next stat. This is the one, this is what I call my focus stat, okay? Focus stat, or you could call it your sanity stat. I have it in little parentheses. You could call it sanity. Essentially, this is a mental health stat, and you do anything that helps you with your mental health. So for me, typically, it's going to be anything that is like a nature walk or walking outside with one of my friends, things of that nature, or another thing, and what it typically is a 5-minute meditation, okay? And again, remember, operational definition. I can define what this is. It is a 5 minutes of meditation, okay? I know exactly what I'm going to do, and that way I know when I fail. And I know that's uncomfortable, but that's how you know you need to improve. If you keep it all vague, you don't know. You're like, oh my God, did I do this thing? Did I not? And it just makes you feel good about not having to fail as much, you know what I mean? So it's not particularly ideal if you keep yourself all vague and foggy. You know what I mean? Again, one bout of physical activity for strength stat, one thing learned for intelligence stat, one thing or 5 minutes of meditation for once a day on your focus stat or sanity stat, whatever you want to call it. Okay, next stat, right? Next stat is called the aura stat, okay? And I like calling it that just because I feel like, you know, I mean, with the whole modern day meme stuff like that about the whole aura thing, but I think it's a pretty cool thing to name the stat for praying all your prayers for 5 times a day because you quite literally feel different. So that's why I call it the aura stat. It just seems cool too, you know what I mean? You're gaining a whole bunch of Islamic, you know, aura, but yeah, so this one I can also operationally define. So the way I define this one is praying all my 5 salah, okay? And I could have said on time, but I'm still not good about doing that, okay? So again, the great thing about this is you can be creative and it sets a set of progression for you specifically because you're being so specific. Does that make sense? So as specific as you want to be as specific as you need to be and want to be for your rate of progression, okay? So for example, if you feel like you're failing a stat a lot, you're like, damn, okay, I'm not getting this done at all. Now you can regress it a little bit and be like, you know what? Instead of doing 10 minutes of meditation, let me do 5 minutes. Or instead of trying to, I mean, this one's a bit sort of controversial, of course, but like prayers, ideally you want to pray on time and as much as you can, but it's like you gotta focus on getting the main prayers down first. You know what I mean? Not even the sunnah, just the main prayers that you're supposed to do, the mandatory ones, right? So like you can regress all of these things however you need be to have that sense of progression and improvement. You know what I mean? So you'll really see that. Okay, fifth and last stat, and I think this one's a pretty good stat as well, is the discipline stat. Okay, so the discipline stat, I haven't really thought this one through a lot. I know you can be really creative with it. Again, you can be really creative with it, but the discipline stat for me essentially just means doing what I said I would do, right? And so the operational definition of that stat is, as long as I've done all the other 4 stats, I can check that one off. Okay, so this makes it to where I need to have done all 4 for me to get that. If I miss one, I also miss that stat mark as well. Does that make sense? And so that'll be a little bit important for what I'm going to tell you soon enough here, okay? And why that's the case. Because one day you can miss a strength stat, and then that means you're missing the discipline stat, even if you did all the other 3. One day maybe you miss a focus stat. One day maybe you miss this, and so you don't get to mark off that discipline stat either, okay? And this is going to be very important for the leveling up mechanism that I'm about to talk about, okay? And that is, in the way that I've defined it within my rule book, okay, you can basically only level up 52 times per year, which is the amount of weeks in a year. So that tells you that the sense of progression is weekly, okay? And I think that's a pretty good indicator. If you do anything more than that, the progression might seem a bit slow, although you can, again, be creative with it. If you do anything sort of less than that, I guess the progression could seem pretty fast. For a lot of you, that might be just what you want. But again, define that, okay? Define that. I like having this sense of progression because I think it's perfect. Weekly basis is a very perfect sense of progression. It also helps me with marking down my days for my strength stats, when I'm gonna rest, things of that nature. So that's what makes it easy for me as well. And yeah, it's just what makes it really easy. But yeah, here's the kicker, right? In order to level up, you must have all of the stats filled in. I think that's what my rule book says. Again, refer to my rule book or the template, I guess I should call it, in the description if I'm getting this wrong. But essentially the way I level up in this is I have to make sure I get all the stats 7 times, okay? So that means I have the potential to level up every single week if I hit every single stat, okay? Now, understand this, right? A lot of you aren't necessarily gonna hit all 4 of the stats excluding discipline, and you'll see why I'm excluding discipline, right? A lot of you won't get a chance to hit that. So if you miss one, it also means you miss discipline. If you miss another the other day, you also miss discipline. You know what I mean? So what this does is it allows you to form more consistent habits revolving around all the other stats that you have, like strength, like clarity, like focus, or like intelligence, and like aura, right? Aura. And so what it does is it forces you to build habits in a way in which is efficient, but it is also helpful towards you, so you're not going through the motions of it, and so that you can mark off that discipline stat. Because if you don't get, that discipline stat, you pretty much don't really level up, you know what I mean? Because you need 7 of the discipline stats as well, So that's not to say that if you mess up one day, it's whatever, right? Yeah, because if you mess up one day, it's like, okay, your discipline stat goes, and then whatever stat you didn't do goes as well, right? And so you could always make it up on another day. You're just not going to be leveling up on a weekly basis. So far, the system has helped me hit all like I'm level 4 now. I've been doing it for a month, so I wanted to test it for myself to see if it actually even works or helps me out. And yeah, it's been working. It's been working great. So that's nice. I haven't been perfect about it, but again, I've only set what I think my rate of progression is, and I think I nailed mine perfectly. And so I'm able to do everything, and it's still challenging enough for me. Okay. And again, you can see what my specific ones are right in the template below, right? And also, let me know in the comments if y'all can access that. I had some trouble, technical difficulties, stuff like that, trying to make it accessible. So let me know if you can actually access that. Okay. Next. So, if a lot of you can recall something I haven't mentioned from the solo leveling anime, and for a lot of you new folks that haven't watched the anime, there's also something called the punishment quest. So let me explain this for people that don't understand. I know people who have watched solo leveling understand this, but the punishment quest is essentially the quest that you get for not completing all your daily tasks. So what this does is it acts as you could almost call it a negative motivator to do the things that you need to do. So the way I see motivation is two aspects, right? One, you're running towards let's say, the best version of yourself, which is like the good thing, right? You're running towards, let's say you're in the middle, you're running towards this thing right over here, which is the best version of yourself. Or for a lot of us, Islamically, Jannah, right? That's what you're running towards. But then behind you, you also have something that keeps you running. You know what I mean? That keeps you going, which is sometimes also the negative motivation, right? So that could be like, I don't want to be where I am now because this version of me sucks and I hate him so much. Or Islamically, this could be Jahannam. You know what I mean? So that's why we have the punishment stat, okay? This stat is super important, okay? And I think psychologically it's also very, very powerful because what's essentially happening is you're telling yourself, if I don't do all these things, there's going to be a consequence involved with it, which means I need to do all these things, okay? And that's not to say you need to go through the motions and do these things, because sometimes all these quests can be a way for you to avoid the punishment quest. But yeah, you need to have the punishment quests as something that you're very attached to. So there's two ways to do the punishment quest. Let me rephrase that. I was about to go onto a word tangent that I didn't know what I was going to say. You know what I mean? So let me rephrase that. Let me take a step back. Punishment quests. Two types of punishment quests you can do, and they both involve stuff that you're not gonna like. Okay, that's the whole point of it. Okay, because we know Sung Jin Woo within the show, like when he had this first punishment task, he was running around for like 4 hours, and there's a chance of death there. So obviously we're not going to put anything in the punishment task that is going to be one directly sort of affecting our health to like a substantial degree, or anything that's going to like hurt us. So like no doing anything stupid, let's just say. Okay, let's be really reasonable here. I want to start off by saying that because I feel like I just need to for whatever reason. But yeah, let me just preface it with that. So, for example, one of the videos I watched that were similar to this, one of the punishment tasks they have was a liver punch. Okay, for a lot of you who don't know, liver punches hurt like a lot, okay? And so he would get a liver punch from his homie if he didn't finish. Now, to each their own, right? But I'm just saying, like, don't do anything completely stupid that is going to absolutely hurt or deteriorate your health. Like, for example, you wouldn't go like doing some, I don't know, jumping off of something and breaking your arm as a punishment quest. You know what I mean? That'd be very, very extreme. Of course, I'm sure it will keep you in line to do your quests, but let's not do that, right? So let me talk about what mine is, and y'all are gonna see it once you click on the template. But mine is essentially, I don't get to have my protein shake, and I'll tell you why this is a really good punishment quest for me specifically. So I'm a fitness coach, right? And I mean, a lot of you know that. I also do in-person training, things of that nature. And so me not having a protein shake means that I not only don't get to be the best version of myself physically, but I don't get to essentially market my physique to people, because if I'm not getting in the protein, then my physique is not, taken care of, and that means it's going to deteriorate, which means all of the other stuff that I either post about or help my clients about, I won't be an example to them. I won't be, all these things. So like a lot of things fall apart if I don't do that, and that works for me, especially because of the whole fitness coach thing, right? And personal trainer thing. So that is a pretty heavy burden for me, you know what I mean? And I can't afford to not have my protein shake, okay? That is literally what contains a lot of the best sort of foods that I have. That's literally majority of a lot of where my protein intake comes from. So I can't afford to do that. So that's why it's a punishment quest for me to give up something that I like. So that's one kind of punishment quest. Give up something you like. So for a lot of y'all, it could be, okay, I'm not allowed to watch anime this night because I didn't finish everything. Okay, that's your punishment quest. Or I'm not allowed to play video games, you know what I mean? And this is gonna take some discipline because a lot of you would, technically there's nothing stopping you from doing this, but what I'd recommend is implementing this with a friend so that they can also hold you accountable if need be. That's the lovely part of this. It's so customizable, yet so, kind of like PoE2, you know what I mean? Skill trees, things of that nature. It's so customizable, yet at the same time so almost co-opable as well. Like you can play it with your friends, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Keep each other accountable, and it's great for that reason. So your friend could be like, "Yo, did you get your strength stat? Or yo, did you do this?" Then you're not getting to do this tonight. You know what I mean? You're not hopping on the game with us. You know what I mean? And that does take some real friends to be able to do. So there is that caveat, but this is the best you can sort of do. So you have to be able to hold your self accountable to that, which is specifically why I said you have to have an operational definition or define things very specifically, okay? So that is very, very important. So again, back to the punishment quest, it's you can give up one thing that you like doing, video games for that night, or taking your, maybe for you it's also a protein shake, things of that nature. Giving up a night of watching anime or doing something fun, you know what I mean? Or the other one is doing something that is painful, okay? But here's the caveat, right? Here's what I would do a little bit differently than the other video, because I don't necessarily want you to hurt yourself, but I mean, I have given you the idea of a liver punch or something like that. I don't want you to hurt yourself, but what you can also do is do something that will actually still go into your improvement as a punishment stat that you don't particularly like doing. So for example, this could be doing push-ups. Oh, okay, I missed my, strength, focus, or aura stat for today. I'm gonna sit down and do 20 push-ups, or even more than that. Whatever is a brutal amount of push-ups, and only you can be honest with yourself. Because again, one push-up is not gonna be a sufficient enough punishment for you to think, oh, I need to do all these things. Oh, but if I don't do them, it's just one push-up, bro, whatever. Like, you're not gonna care, you know what I mean? You need a substantial punishment to act against the motivation of, against all the motivations of not doing the right things, right? And again, this is where it really helps to have an accountability partner and someone to do this with, because otherwise, when you don't do your tasks and you don't do your punishment quests either, your friend can look at you and be like, bro, I mean, I'm not gonna cuss right now, bro, but bro, you're low key. I don't know how to say it. You're low key weak. All I could think of was profane stuff, but I'm trying to quit that habit because we're in Ramadan right now. But yeah, stuff like even what I'm talking about right now, profanity. Like if you're bad with profanity, you can even incorporate that somehow with a good amount of creativity into the skill tree. You know what I mean? So it's so very flexible. I think I had some other stuff in there as well. I think, yeah, so based on how you define what you're doing, based on how you define your stats, there's also some other ground rules. So for example, you can't work out twice a day and count that as your strength stat for Monday and Tuesday if you just did that Monday. You know what I mean? Or you can't put in two strength stats for Monday if you do two workouts on Monday. You know what I mean? Unless your definition of the strength stat specifically defines that to be the case. Okay, now I know maybe there's some loopholes, maybe there's some stuff like that within the system that or the template that I've created, but you let me know in the comments if that is working or if you have any creative ideas, maybe you want to talk about it. Or I also have that free community link in the description, the Level Up Solo community where I do calls, stuff like that. I haven't been doing them as much lately, but if we start to, you know, within the community have some sort of start to use a lot of the template more and it feels a lot more helpful, then we can probably talk about how we can implement more new creative stuff into the template, and I'd be more than happy to implement that. Like, you'll scroll down and you'll see it's just patch 1.1, you know what I mean? Maybe we'll use it in the long term, maybe you won't, but I've been using it and it has been personally helping me a lot, so I'd highly recommend it. It's helping me keep with my prayers, my salah during Ramadan. And then again, you could even add like a aura plus stat where you're doing tarawih. You know what I mean? You're making sure you're doing at least 8 rak'ah of tarawih every single time. You know what I mean? So again, just to go over everything I've gone over, basically, get creative with it. Put in different sort of stats. Be very specific with the way that you define it so that you know when you have failed, okay? You know exactly when you failed so that now you know you need to do the punishment quests, you know what I mean? And then that acts as a motivation of like, I don't want to go through that again, you know what I mean? A lot of y'all punishment quests could also be you got to go and run, you know what I mean? You got to go run around the block if you really hate running, things like that. But a lot of this is going to really, really help. One, if you're really honest with yourself, right? If you're really honest and conscientious, it's going to help a lot. And it's going to help if you have someone to do it with that can keep you accountable to it, okay? That's going to help significantly, okay? Let me think if I have any other things I wanted to talk about. No, I think that should pretty much it. I just wanted to talk about this because it's been helping me out. And yeah, that's pretty much it, honestly. But y'all take it easy. Ramadan Mubarak. And let me know how it goes, all right? Comment down below, all right? See y'all. Take it easy. Peace.